"Stay out of our business, old man!" they yelled, pushing him away from the training equipment. When careers hung in the balance, his forgotten expertise became their only salvation. Welcome to Untold Lives. Before we begin this story of overlooked wisdom and forgotten champions, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe these stories deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Frank Martinez arrived at Elite Performance Center every morning at 4:30 a.m., 30 minutes before it opened. At 67, with arthritis in his knees and shaking hands, he pushed his mop cart through a gym filled with professional athletes and Olympic hopefuls. To everyone there, he was just the janitor, the invisible old man who cleaned equipment and emptied trash. But Frank had been watching, and what he saw worried him. The head trainer was Marcus Webb, 28 years old, master's degree, full of confidence but lacking real experience. Webb ran the gym like his personal kingdom, and Frank was barely worth acknowledging. But Frank kept watching the athletes train with dangerous techniques that would end careers. When he tried to help, pointing out flaws that could cause injury, Webb's response was always the same. "Stay in your lane, old man. Stick to mopping." The breaking point came when Sarah Chen, a gymnast training for nationals, was practicing a routine with timing that would send her to the hospital. Frank approached Webb and the other trainers. "Her release timing is off. She's going to under-rotate and land on her neck." Webb turned, his face showing irritation. "Stay out of our business, old man," he yelled, pushing Frank away from the training area. "You're here to clean, not coach. Stick to what you know, mops and toilets." The other trainers laughed. Athletes smirked. Frank walked away, humiliated but not surprised. 20 minutes later, Sarah attempted her routine. She released too early, under-rotated exactly as Frank predicted, and came down hard on her neck. The sound echoed across the gym. She didn't get up. The ambulance took 18 minutes to arrive. Sarah was conscious but couldn't move her left arm. As they wheeled her past Frank, she whispered to the paramedic, "The janitor." He tried to warn them. Sarah's injury made local news. Rising gymnast's career ended in training accident. Webb never mentioned Frank's warning in his report, but word spread among the athletes. They began paying attention to the old janitor who had predicted the accident. A week later, Miguel Santos, a promising boxer, approached Frank quietly. "My shoulder's killing me after workouts. Webb says it's normal. But what do you see?" Frank studied Miguel's technique. "Your right cross. You're dropping your elbow, hyperextending the joint." Frank quickly showed him the correct form. Miguel's eyes widened. "Where did you learn this?" Frank hesitated. "I used to coach at the Olympic Training Center." Before Miguel could respond, Webb's voice cut across the gym. "Miguel, get away from him!" Webb strode over, fury in his eyes. "I thought I made myself clear about staying in your lane. Last warning, old man. One more time and you're gone." But the damage was done. Athletes started asking questions. The old janitor had been somebody once. 2 weeks later, Jake Morrison walked in for his routine training. Jake was 24, undefeated in 12 fights, and 3 weeks from his first title shot. He was Elite Performance's golden boy. Frank watched Jake warming up and saw immediately what was wrong. Jake was moving in ways that would leave him vulnerable against Carlos Rivera, his upcoming opponent. Rivera was a veteran who exploited exactly these kinds of weaknesses. Frank tried to ignore it. His job was already in jeopardy. But Jake's habits were dangerous. After Jake finished sparring, Frank made his decision. "Your left shoulder," Frank said quietly. "You're telegraphing your right cross." Jake looked surprised. "What?" "Every time you throw your right, you dip your left shoulder. Rivera will see it. He built his career reading tells like that." Jake studied Frank's face, seeing confidence and knowledge. "What did you used to be?" Before Frank could answer, Webb's voice exploded across the gym. "Morrison, get away from him!" Webb stormed over, reporters following, sensing a story. "What did I tell you about interfering with my athletes?" Jake stepped between them. Actually, what he said made sense. "He doesn't know what he's talking about," Webb's voice echoed. "He's a janitor." "A nobody. Look at what he is, a broken-down old man who cleans toilets." The gym went silent. Athletes stopped working out. Even reporters raised their phones. Frank felt 43 years of knowledge and pride rise up. I was head coach at the Olympic Training Center for 12 years, Frank said, his voice carrying across the silent gym. I trained 3 Olympic gold medalists, 7 world champions, and 47 professional title holders. Complete silence. I coached Miguel Santos Sr. to the welterweight championship in 1987. I coached Maria Gonzalez to Olympic gold in 1992. I coached Danny Williams through his entire professional career. Webb's mouth opened without sound. I've been watching your fighters develop habits that will end careers. I tried to help because that's what coaches do, but you were so concerned with protecting your ego, you couldn't see past the mop in my hands. Webb finally found his voice. If you were really... Why are you here? Frank's shoulders sagged. Because Olympic Training Center funding got cut in 2019. Because younger coaches with degrees were cheaper. Because I'm 67 and nobody wants to take a chance on someone my age. He looked around the gym. Because sometimes life doesn't care about your resume. Jake stepped forward. Show me what you mean about the shoulder. Frank demonstrated the tell. Jake's eyes widened as he realized how obvious it was. Rivera will see that from across the ring, Jake said. Probably in the first round, Frank confirmed. Jake turned to Webb. Marcus, can he work with me? Webb stared at both of them, his reputation balanced on his next words. Finally, he stepped aside. Show him. For 2 hours, Frank worked with Jake, correcting the tell and a dozen other flaws invisible to everyone else. His movements were stiff, but his eye was perfect, his understanding encyclopedic. Other athletes gathered to watch, even trainers stopped to observe. Frank's voice carried the authority of someone who had guided world-class athletes through championship moments. By session's end, Jake's footwork was cleaner, his guard tighter, the tell gone. How does it feel? Frank asked. Jake threw a combination. Right. For the first time in months, it feels right. Webb approached uncomfortably. Frank, I owe you an apology. Would you consider staying as a consultant? Actual coaching? Frank looked around the gym at athletes watching with new respect. I'll think about it. 3 weeks later, Jake Morrison defeated Carlos Rivera by unanimous decision. In interviews, Jake said, I had help from someone who's been watching boxing longer than I've been alive. Sometimes the most important lessons come from people you least expect. Frank watched from his apartment, no longer just a janitor but senior coaching consultant. His arthritis still hurt, his hands still shook, he was still 67, but he was no longer invisible. The next morning at Elite Performance, athletes greeted him by name. Trainers asked his input. Webb introduced him as one of the most experienced coaches in the country. His mop cart remained in storage, no longer needed. Sometimes the most powerful voices belong to people society has decided are finished. Frank Martinez didn't need validation. He had 43 years of championships to remind him of his worth. But he showed everyone that wisdom doesn't expire, that experience doesn't become worthless in an unexpected package. Have you ever met someone whose value was hidden beneath assumptions? Share their story in the comments. Let us know your city. Subscribe to Silent Legends. We honor forgotten experts, dismissed mentors, and coaches who never stopped caring. Because champions aren't made by trainers with newest degrees. Sometimes they're made by the person pushing a mop who sees what everyone else misses. Don't forget to follow and like for more stories like this.